Hi, my name is Bettina Migge. I'm from University College Dublin, and together with Britta Schneider from Europa-Universität Viadrina, I'm leading the working group 6, Ideologies, Beliefs and Attitudes. So one of the things we're looking at, or the main thing we're looking at, is the conceptualization of language in the human-machine era. So what are we particularly interested in? We want to understand how technologies shape language ideologies. So specifically, we want to look at how technologies sustain or challenge existing language ideologies. Specifically, we've been focusing on the standard language ideologies, and we want to understand, are there new language ideologies or views of looking at language that are emerging? And specifically in this, we are looking at this interaction between technology, humans, and commercialization in the production of language ideologies. And we want to understand how what we call the datafication of language in the technological space interacts with language, culture, society, and relationships. So that's a broad topic. And just in case, here are some ideas about what a language ideology is. So this comes very much from linguistic anthropology work, and here ideology is not understood as a wrong way of looking at the world. It basically refers to the kinds of beliefs of the form and the nature and the function of language and communicative behavior, and how that relates to society. So very important people in that area are Susan Gall, for example, and Catherine Woolard. The one language ideology that, particularly in the European space, is very important and was propagated also through colonialism is the so-called standard language ideology, and it argues, or it purports, that there is one, or normally one, variety of language that is better and is the rightful way of doing things. And it came about as a result of nation building in Europe. Okay, so we want to basically look at, or one of the things we've been looking at is how standard language ideology has been faring in this technological age, and what new perspectives emerge here. Now, how do we study language ideologies? It's actually quite a complex way of doing it. So we look, at the one hand, at the practices within the industry. What do companies do with language? Okay. So, and we also look at how companies and designers and computational linguists and so on and so forth, and the society as well, are talking about language. What are their discourses? We look at what people are doing online, for example, in social media. What are the kinds of genres that emerge, the kinds of practices? But we also look more generally what is happening with language in this age. So we're looking at all of those together, so you can see all the different linkages that exist here. Just to give you two examples, one thing that comes up a lot in the language industry, especially from a company level perspective around language, is that language should be representative of what's happening in the social space. But most of the time what happens is that language is basically scraped from the internet or wherever it can be found in a written and pre-existing stage. And then what happens is it needs to be what is called de-biased, or a reduction of bias needs to take place. And so in order to get to a representative data set, so what happens actually, rather than people focusing on bias, they don't systematically look at the text that they scrape and analyze the actual biases in there, but focus on certain socially prominent biases. So gender, for example, has been very prominent, when other kinds of social biases are probably equally important, maybe more important, especially for certain data types. The actual debiasing is typically done not manually, but automatically. So machines are being programmed in certain ways to look for certain words and for certain constructions in order to identify them and then to remove them. And rather than enhanced data sets that are considered biased, with additional data, what we typically find is that biased data are being used, and whatever biases are considered important are basically exchanged with unbiased words. So maybe there could be negative words replaced with positive words, or male words, pronouns with female ones, and then new data sets are automatically generated. So in the end, we come up with a very artificial data set that only partially relates to the human world, and the idea is that even the notion of unbiased often is very restricted, in the sense that it assumes that as soon as everybody is 50-50 presented in a data set, well, all kinds of genders or so on, then it's unbiased. So we get to all kinds of problems, and there was a recent issue around for example, images. The last example is we've been looking at text production and summarizing tools. So there's a lot of tools nowadays that help you write text, referencing, style correction, and so on. And while these are obviously useful in that they create new jobs, prompt engineering, for example, they might help us correct text. So there's a quicker speed of producing new texts. And it might also help us with certain kinds of detail management in text. It also has a number of problems that also relate back to some of the ideological issues. For example, most importantly here is that all of these text production tools heavily basically continue to promote certain value tropes from the standard language ideology, namely speak like a native speaker, use correct language, for example. So, and we also see a much more rigid match between language and genres. So in total, what we find is, while there are positive aspects, we do find a lot of maintenance of the standard language ideology. And in fact, what is a problem is that standard language ideologies that or standard languages that had been destandardizing are now being amplified in the human machine era.